Are you among those who are concerned about the impact of Chinese electric vehicle imports on the U.S. auto industry? The ongoing debate surrounding the imposition of tariffs on Chinese EVs suggests that the question on everyone's mind is whether the U.S. should impose tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles to protect its auto industry. The implications of such a decision could be far-reaching and complex, with both positive and negative outcomes. Join us in this video as we explore the pros and cons of imposing tariffs and what it could mean for the future of the U.S. auto industry. China now leads the world in both sales and manufacture of electric vehicles, a market that has experienced tremendous growth in recent years. In the meantime, the U.S. auto sector has lagged. The U.S. government put tariffs on Chinese electric automobiles in an attempt to defend their home market. China Electric Vehicles has emerged as the leading participant in the market as a result of the global automobile industry's shift towards electrification. China achieved an amazing 44% global market share for plug-in cars in 2020. However, the US has been finding it difficult to stay up with this trend, and many believe that this is because the government is not providing enough support. The US government is very interested in growing the auto sector since it is one of the biggest in the world. They aim to give American automakers a competitive edge in the market by enacting taxes on Chinese electric automobiles. However, this might potentially lead to a trade conflict between the US and China, which would be extremely detrimental to both nations' economies. Tariffs may help American automakers in the short run, but a more extensive and all-encompassing strategy that tackles the underlying source of the industry's problems, a lack of government backing for the electrification shift, is ultimately necessary to address the problems facing the sector. In the end, all governments should encourage this transition, since the usage of electric vehicles is essential for lowering greenhouse gas emissions and building a sustainable future. Tariff supporters contend that the imposition of tariffs is required to shield American workers and the domestic auto sector from what they perceive to be unfair competition from Chinese producers of electric vehicles. These proponents contend that the government provides substantial subsidies to Chinese EV producers, giving them an unfair competitive edge over US automakers. As such, they view the tariffs as an essential instrument for leveling the playing field and giving American businesses a just opportunity to compete in the market. Proponents of tariffs believe that their actions will boost American manufacturing and generate employment in the United States. They contend that American consumers will be more likely to purchase domestically made electric vehicles if the price of Chinese electric vehicles rises as a result of tariffs, which will ultimately help the country's auto industry and generate jobs for Americans. Currently, 25% of U.S. tariffs apply to Chinese EV imports. Proponents of this law contend that it will boost the economy and safeguard American employment. They think that the tariffs will strengthen the U.S. economy as a whole, increase employment in the manufacturing and service sectors, and stimulate domestic manufacture of electric vehicles. However, critics counter that it is unlikely that the tariffs will have the intended effect. The analysis of U.S.-China automobile trade from the Peterson Institute states that the tariffs have not significantly impacted employment or domestic EV production. Critics also note that if the tariffs raise the cost of Chinese EVs, American consumers may become less interested in these vehicles, which would result in the loss of a sizable market share. Furthermore, the US-China trade relationship may suffer long-term consequences from the imposition of the tariffs. China may apply counter-tariffs on US exports in response, which might hurt US companies and lead to more economic difficulties. Tariff advocates contend that their policy will safeguard US workers and generate employment opportunities, but the regulation's wider effects may have unanticipated repercussions. Ultimately, rather than depending exclusively on tariffs to level the playing field, policymakers should take into account all of the measures available to increase the competitiveness of the U.S. auto sector. Tariff opponents claim that the proposed legislation is a protectionist measure that will be more detrimental than beneficial. They claim that imposing tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles will drive up their costs, which will eventually trickle down to American consumers. American automakers' sales will undoubtedly decline as a result of this price increase, but Chinese competitors' market share will rise. Opponents also contend that other nations produce electric cars besides China. Germany, South Korea, Japan, and other nations are also heavily involved in the electric vehicle industry. As a result, taxes on Chinese electric cars by themselves won't address the fundamental issues facing American automakers, who are already having difficulty competing in the market. It's also important to remember that not all American automakers agree with these levies. The notable manufacturers, General Motors, Ford, and Tesla, are represented by the Electric Drive Transportation Association, EDTA, which has issued a warning that these tariffs could have the opposite effect of what is intended and cut off access to essential parts from China. The tariffs might not be sustainable in the long run, particularly if the US decides to impose carbon taxes or other environmentally friendly policies that could hurt Chinese electric car sales. It's also important to keep in mind that the Chinese government supports the EV sector with grants, tax cuts, and subsidies. Because of the perception that these incentives constitute unfair competition, American automakers find it difficult to compete. This situation might encourage the Chinese government to acquire more domestic brands rather than foreign ones, which would ultimately hurt US automakers. As a result, while tariffs may seem like a quick fix for the US auto industry's competitiveness, opponents warn of a range of unintended negative consequences. The real solution lies in addressing the underlying problems of American auto manufacturers' more limited capabilities in the EV market, and it should not be resolved through a protectionist policy that could potentially harm the broader US economy. The case of Section 301 tariffs illustrates recent developments on the efficacy of tariffs. In June 2020, the US administration decided against imposing duties on Chinese lithium-ion battery technologies, which are essential to the electric vehicle (EV) sector. Electric vehicles run on lithium-ion batteries, which the US can produce in small quantities domestically. Putting tariffs on Chinese lithium-ion battery technology would have seriously hampered US innovation. Additionally, it would have made American automakers less competitive in the world EV market. However, American electric vehicle makers now have access to China's most recent battery technologies thanks to the removal of the proposed tariffs. This action could thereby increase the US electric vehicle market's growth and competitiveness. This development demonstrates that tariffs do not always work as planned to achieve desired outcomes. Imposing tariffs in this situation would have been counterproductive. The US administration's move to rescind its planned tariffs on Chinese lithium-ion battery technologies emphasizes the necessity of taking into account the particulars of each situation before enacting tariffs. As a result, decision-makers should proceed cautiously when imposing tariffs and take the economy's long-term implications into account. But the question of whether the US should levy tariffs on Chinese electric cars to defend its auto industry calls for a careful analysis. There are legitimate worries about the long-term effects of the tariffs, even though they would offer the US auto industry some short-term respite. Tariffs could lead to trade conflicts with China, and US automakers might not be able to compete in the market for electric vehicles. To maintain the US auto industry's competitiveness in the global electric car market, it would be wiser to invest in R&D and negotiate fair trade agreements. Such policies can guarantee positive trade relations with other nations while offering the support required to increase domestic production of electric automobiles. In addition to promoting innovation, these initiatives can level the playing field for domestic automakers and set them up for long-term success. In addition, implementing progressive policies that promote the adoption of electric vehicles can have a positive impact on the environment and reduce emissions, which is critical in addressing climate change. Governments can incentivize electric vehicle ownership by providing tax incentives and rebates, building charging infrastructure, and encouraging the adoption of EVs in public transportation and fleet vehicles. Increasing government funding for the development of electric vehicles is one possible remedy that would help both local automakers and American workers. This would support the creation of a trained workforce in the sector, as well as the advancement of novel and cutting-edge electric vehicle technology in the US. Putting in place fair trade laws that support US-based companies producing electric cars is an additional strategy. To level the playing field for vehicles built in the United States, this may involve offering incentives to businesses to relocate their manufacturing operations to the country or putting tariffs on imported electric vehicles. In the end, ensuring that the US car sector maintains its competitiveness while also addressing the pressing need to switch to electric vehicles will require a multifaceted approach. Through the prioritization of research and development, the provision of trained labor, and the implementation of equitable trade policies, it is possible to establish a sustainable future for the US car industry and the environment. I appreciate you seeing it. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, share, and subscribe to our channel.